welcome one and all. Good afternoon, good morning, or good evening from wherever you are joining us. Today is the fourth session of the Governance Gurus mini masterclass series on corporate governance and leadership. And today we'll be talking about agile approaches to strategic goals and business objectives. In this time of pandemic, many businesses have had to reassess what they're actually doing in regards to their strategy and their business objectives. There's never been a time more pressing than now when businesses really need to be agile and be able to adapt to the current situation and the evolving situations as they come. Today we will touch on various aspects of strategy. We'll look at the aspects of mission and vision and also core values, and we'll also look at the customer journey as well as part of being agile. And agile companies look at technology. If for any reason you've got any questions, please put those into the chat section, and at the end of the session there'll be an open mic opportunity for us to share and discuss and talk, and I'll answer any questions that come through during the course of the session. So when we think about organizations historically, traditionally have been very hierarchical, and if we think back to the early 1910, this is when Henry Ford started the whole aspect of scientific approach to manufacturing, and he revolutionized the areas of the way businesses approached strategy and also operational excellence. And so if we think back to Ford and the process there, they were able to take a process of building a car from around 12 hours or so to around 90 minutes. That in itself is quite unique. And when we think about it, right now we're in the fourth industrial revolution. It's already started, and the actual effects of COVID-19 have really impacted businesses and made people have to go digital. Many businesses now are actually playing catch up. Even within Governance Gurus, we've had to adopt a different style. We discussed before COVID different opportunities and different areas of going to market, because most of our trainings were face-to-face. And so we were looking for more of an on-demand and also online training. I am one of the trainers for ICSA courses, and ICSA are the Chartered Governance Institute of the UK, and so we do training there. All of the courses have had to go online, and all of the actual June exam was cancelled due to COVID, because those exams were normally face-to-face and had to be physically taken. The next exam is November, and we have a batch of students that are going into those exams. They're now going online. So businesses, institutes and organizations have had to adapt and change is good. We don't change just for the sake of changing. We change because we need to evolve and better ourselves as organizations. And so when we think of strategy, strategy is not something that is there in isolation. Strategy is something that fits within the purpose, the vision, the mission of an organization. Strategy is a means to an end. And so when we think of strategy, we have to look at the past, we have to consider the present, and we have to look forward towards the future. And right now, the future is uncertain. The markets are up and down. Many businesses have folded. Other businesses have had to get government relief. The airline industries, hotel and leisure, and other aspects have been impacted by this present situation. But where there are failures, there are also opportunities, and we have to maximize and look. And being agile is one of those aspects of how we adapt and we change and we optimize and look for opportunities within the market. Who are our customers? What are our customers looking for? And how can we reach them where they are? And so we have to think about why we have the strategy. What is the strategy for? Why? How are we going to go about implementing that particular strategy? What are we targeting? Where are we aiming? Are we aiming towards a certain demographic? Are we aiming towards a certain geographical location? And then we have to ask ourselves, when will we move? So imagine you're an organization already within your strategy, you're thinking about expanding into other countries. You've already chosen those countries, but now we have to think about when. When do we move? Is now the right time? Can we do what we need to do from a strategic direction point of view? Will we have the same impact if we move now, or should we wait? Should we move in fully, or should we just move in and take a slow approach? And so strategy is one of those things that has to be approached and has to focus in on not just the long-term vision, but also strategy is the vehicle that helps us move forward with the mission. And so I put strategy in the middle. Strategy is not the be all and end all. Strategy is one of the elements that we have to focus on. There are other elements that we have to consider, such as corporate culture. We have to think about our capacity as an organization, and we also have to think about what is it that our customers are and our consumers are looking for, and also our pipeline for new customers and consumers. And quite often businesses think that they have something that businesses need. And in the last session we looked at Kodak and we looked at BlackBerry, just very briefly touching on the fact that sometimes businesses fail to hit the wave, the rise of the wave, and instead of rising high and going with the flow, they get left behind. And so surfers, they're looking for that crescent, that wave to get onto the top of, and then ride the wave through all the way through to the coast. And businesses need to do the same. Right now we're in a troubled time where many organizations are looking at their traditional model and thinking this is not necessarily fit for purpose. Our strategy, our business objectives are something that we need to reconsider and we need to focus on to see how we take things forward. And so vision is very important. Vision has to tie in with strategy because vision is focused on long term. The mission is tied to your strategy, but underpinning everything are the core values of the business. We have a vision that is focused towards a long-term defined goal. Maybe you want to be the best airline in the world, or maybe you want to be the most friendly and accommodating hotel providing customer service. Maybe you're in the service industry and you're providing consulting. Maybe you want to provide the best training to a certain area of the demographic. And so values have to underpin all of the aspects of what a business is doing. Now, these are traditional methods, and later we will look at some of the agile aspects, but right now we need to look at the fundamentals of vision, mission, core values, and strategy. And a strategy generally is there as a vehicle to achieve the mission, and the mission heads us towards the vision. Why is that important? Well, we need direction and we need focus, and without that we are unlikely to achieve any goals at all, and we'll be like a ship without a rudder. We will be blowing left and right and we won't actually make any headway. And so as a business, strategy is the vehicle that allows us to consider how we will approach and the ways we will approach the coming years. And so historically, strategy has been for a much longer period, sometimes 5 to 10 years, and even I've put there 3 to 5 years. 3 to 5 years in this current environment and situation, 3 to 5 years is an enormous amount of time. So some businesses have gone to a hybrid model and they have a rolling strategy. Strategy leads on to business plan and the budget. Most strategies are focused on financial performance and the areas where the business can add to shareholder value. Now, not all businesses are for profit. Some are not for profit organizations or state-owned organizations that are focused on other aspects, but this is the traditional commercial corporate entity that we're considering today, but we can consider other aspects as we go along. When we come to the last part of the session, feel free to ask any questions in regards to different types of organizations and any questions you might have. Also, when we think about corporate objectives have to tie into strategy. And strategy, when we think about that, we're looking at a longer period, whereas with the business plan and the budget and the corporate objectives, they're generally for a period of 12 months, possibly up to 18 months because of the actual cycle. And so in that area, businesses are driven for short-term performance measures. So if the focus is on shareholder value or generating or maximizing profit, then businesses will do that. Now, one of the things that we really need to consider in these times is that if the strategy, the business plan and budget and corporate objectives haven't changed since the beginning of 2020, then if people are reaching their targets and their goals and their corporate objectives, there potentially could be areas of fraud or people cutting corners and covering one eye when it comes to corporate governance. And so I wanted to touch on the aspects of one particular organization, Royal Dutch Shell. Now, I've looked at Shell, I've looked at BP, and I've looked at other organizations, and I wanted to focus on Royal Dutch Shell because of what they've been doing for very many years talking about diversity and inclusion. They have leadership programs for women. So gender diversity is very key. Out of their board of directors, 5 out of the 11 directors are women. And I want to promote and talk about Royal Dutch Shell. When we think about strategy is about getting the maximum from what we have. And many organizations have failed to look at diversity, whether that's diversity in regards to gender or ethnicity, or in regards to diversity of thought. And many boards have failed to embrace technology and to also bring in the newer generation, the millennials or Generation Z, who are very focused on technology and also speed, dynamism. And so when we think about Shell, I've put together some details here. This is from their website. They talk about their vision. They don't call it the vision. They talk about long-term ambition. So they don't use the word vision and mission. They do talk about values, and they do talk about strategy. And so they focus more on the strategic side to get them to where they want to be. And so they want to be having a reduced carbon footprint of energy, and they want to be able to be at some point in the future net zero when it comes to carbon emissions. But they're aware that there needs to be certain fuels used to help drive economic development and give access to people to be able to be mobilized. And so their mission or their strategic objectives, which are looking forward to help them to achieve their vision, is they want to be able to invest in areas, they want to free up cash flow, they also want to be able to respond to what society needs: cleaner, cheaper energy that is convenient and easily accessible. But they are also looking and focused on the societal aspects that are there in relation to where they're working internationally. And so Royal Dutch Shell have focused on the aspects of society and giving back. And there's very many programs where they're focused on giving back, whether it's planting trees, or whether it's education, or whether it's providing training to employees, employing people locally rather than bringing expats in to work in countries that they operate. And then their core values: honesty, integrity, and respect for people. They're also focused on diversity and inclusion. And I was doing some training in Malaysia, and I focused on a couple of different organizations, Petronas being one of them, Nestle, and also Shell, because these are 3 organizations that really are focused on raising the bar when it comes to diversity, and in particular gender diversity. And so Royal Dutch Shell, back around 100 years ago, they entered into Malaysia, helping them in regards to finding and extracting oil and gas. And from that time, long before any legislation or mandate came in place or regulation, Royal Dutch Shell were focused on developing women leaders, and they invested a lot of money in regards to the pipeline of how to get women into the oil and gas industry, how to get them into managerial and senior managers positions, but also at the board level, tone from the top. But what is their strategy? Well, their strategy is focused on strengthening their position as a leading energy company by providing oil and gas and low carbon energy. They also focus on the need of being collaborative. They have to work with their customers, local governments, business partners, investors, and other stakeholders. But they're not unaware that the strategy is focused on the outlook for the energy sector. Now, if this was from their latest annual report, the 2019 annual report, which was published in 2020, there they did focus on some of the areas because COVID-19, keeping employees safe, and also the impact of the demand for oil and gas has significantly reduced during this period. And so Shell has had to look at how they approach the aspects. Now, because businesses are not using so much energy, that has had a positive effect in regards to carbon emissions. But when we think about the commercial aspects, businesses are really suffering worldwide in regards to supply chain, in regards to other aspects as well. And so Shell also looked at some of the issues that would approach them. And so they talked about technology, using technology and systems to help them identify. They also looked at some of the other ambitions, how to respond to competitive forces. They're focused on the external, not just the internal. They're looking at the market, and also they're looking at the economic, political, social, and environmental aspects. All of this said, all businesses should be looking at these areas, the micro and the macro environment, when it comes to strategy and obtaining business objectives. The whole aspect of a business is to have a purpose, and that purpose is towards sustainability and also focused towards success. If a business is sustainable, then it's likely that it will be very successful. But there are times where businesses face adversity. And so one of the things that Shell do, they're always focused on improving and aiming towards operational performance, and also, of course, cash is king, having cash flow available. And so they also looked on some of the other areas. If we look at the oil and gas industry, health and safety are two of the biggest concerns. A year or two ago, there were some fatalities, and the performance of one of the chief executives of an oil and gas company was actually penalized when it came to their performance and the bonus that they got. They also got a reduced salary based on a number of fatalities, because they were focused towards having minimal or no fatalities based on their operations. And businesses have to learn. Some businesses operate in dangerous situations, so there are high risks, and that's why the third element is security. Oil and gas, they're entering into countries where potentially there are hazards and problems, and security is key in regards to vessels, also the actual grounds for drilling and extracting, and the wells as well. And so this is the time that we need to be focused on where we are. So in 2018, businesses were hurting significantly from the impact of the drop of oil prices. Now, that didn't happen in 2018. That happened a number of years before that, but the actual impact was starting to hit in 2017 and then had a knock-on effect into 2018. In 2017, we saw many businesses starting to downsize. The oil and gas industry was majorly impacted. If we look here within the United Arab Emirates and the GCC, the drop in oil prices have had a major impact in regards to the 2030 vision that many of the countries have got focused on the future. And so oil prices are one aspect, and then we also started to see rhetoric and discussion regarding trade war prices. We think about Brexit and the negative effect that had. 3 years of deciding whether to stay or to leave, and so that caused major problems. But in 2019, businesses really started to be optimistic. They saw growth, they saw development, they also saw opportunity. And 2019 was a very good year in regards to business, and there were lots of opportunities. Yes, some businesses failed during 2019, but we'll always have that life cycle of businesses failing. But we were looking towards 2020 with real anticipation. But when we came to 2020, boom, coronavirus hit and everything changed, and everything has changed. And for the foreseeable future, things will be the way they are right now. Some businesses, some countries, some organizations have gone back to business as normal. Whether or not we have phase 2 of this pandemic will be seen. If we hit phase 2 and there is a second wave of the pandemic, then history teaches us, if we look back at the Spanish flu, that normally the second wave is a much higher peak, and so the first wave was just a warning towards the second wave. So we trust and hope that we will find a vaccine. We are sorry for all of the loss of life that has happened worldwide, but we now have to think about how do we try and get back to where we are. As businesses, this is do or die time for many businesses, and it's not just SMEs that are suffering, medium-sized businesses, but also large businesses. We saw that Wirecard recently collapsed, and there were debts of 2 billion missing from their books. And so we look back historically that businesses, if we look at Toshiba, and I talked about Toshiba at the last session, Toshiba during the economic crisis in 2008, around that time, 7-8, the CEOs, there were 3 successive CEOs, they hid massive losses within their financial statements and hid that to the market. And 3 successive CEOs allegedly hid the fraud, and it would be unlikely that people within the organization of Toshiba wouldn't have known that these losses were being hidden. Now, where we are today, there is, as I mentioned at the beginning, there is a high chance of fraud taking place. And so we have to consider some of the elements of how do we survive and what is our approach to survival. Do we survive by any means, or do we 5, ethically. What we do now will really impact how we're perceived in the future. And so many businesses have taken the opportunity to cut staff. In the UK, they furloughed staff and taken advantage of the government organization. And so from that side, and so we have to think about where we are as an organization, what do we want to do, and how will we approach the future. Today, we have to think about tomorrow. Hopefully, we've made provision in the good years to provide enough to allow us to, number one, maintain our workforce and our employees, and also drive change. And so we put together an 8-point strategy execution model focused on the short and medium term objectives, which have to be focused through and delivered through culture and strategic execution. And obviously, strategy has to be set and focused on where are we heading, why are we going there, how can we maximize our resources. Right now, resource is scarce, cash flow is king. We have to look at our structure. How are we structuring our organization? Are we going to keep the traditional hierarchy, or are we going to move to a more agile model that allows for teams that are more organic and allow for people to be able to be moved both vertically and horizontally? Processes and systems are very important, and when we touch on processes and systems, we really have to think about IT systems, IT process, protocols, and also IT governance and IT security. Very, very important, especially if businesses are going to the hybrid model of how they're going to do business going forward. There is a big concern in regards to the risk of leaking of data and other aspects. We cannot forget employees. People are the people, employees are the people that deliver, and they're the ones that we must engage. An employee who's engaged is also focused on the needs and the desires and the trends that are happening within the customer base. They're also looking for opportunities. Definitely in agile organizations, employees are focused on solving problems for employees, and so that customer journey and mapping that through is really important for businesses. People quite often forget that there's an internal focus and there's also an external focus when it comes to employee engagement and customer centricity. Agile organizations really focus on building strong teams, not necessarily big teams, but strong teams who are agile and are able to move into different teams and different business lines and to work on certain projects. And so they have external training, but they also have internal training to build knowledge and to hone and develop talent. There also needs to be focused objectives. If we're not focused towards a certain objective, then where are we heading as an organization? And so when we think about the seventh element is regular monitoring. And so this is where the whole aspect of risk management oversight comes in. And businesses need to see what their strategy is, and then in regards to their execution, what are the key risks to not delivering on the focused objectives. And finally, we have businesses that need to be able to, they need to be adjusting and tacking and changing the speed. Sometimes there should be an acceleration, where there's an opportunity, or if we see something is slowing, we should be taking our foot off the accelerator. And so when we think about the various elements, we think about the short and the medium term objectives. That has to lead us to where the vision of the organization is. When we think about organizational structure, it's not so much about the boxes of who does what. It's more to do with empowerment, who has responsibility and where is the accountability, having quick decisions as well through a delegation of authority, using technology through processes and systems to allow us to be able to act, and also giving us one view of the truth. Very, very important. And so we think of the traditional model, and we looked at this last week when we were looking at some of the values that the company secretary adds to the high-performing boards. But we also need to think now from a different angle. We think that the shareholders are the ones that give oversight to the company through the appointment of directors and also the appointment of external auditors. There should be independent thought, there should be independent challenge, and that should be focused on the elements that are there in regards to longevity, succession, sustainability, and success. And so the board, when we think about the board are focused on the CEO and the management team. They've got very specific tasks that are assigned to them. They have to look at the strategic direction for the company. They have to provide management oversight. They also have to provide risk management strategy to focus the business on where it needs to be in regards to business objectives and the strategy execution, but also at the same time looking at emerging risks and those inherent and also residual risks. But most commercial organizations are focused towards shareholder value, and so the boards still have to provide value to the shareholders. And the CEO's role and the management role is all about how do they implement and execute the strategy that has been provided, the direction that has been provided by the board of directors. They have to be able to cascade those strategic directions and implement those across the business to the various chiefs and business lines. They also have to put in place the budget and maintain that budget, but at the same time have controls and systems in place that alert the management team when they're deviating, whether there's an increase or a complete decrease, because sometimes good news is not necessarily good news. Something is if we have too much revenue, why suddenly have we got more revenue? Why have we suddenly got more profit? Where did this come from? Is this recurring, or is this one time? How do we focus on these areas? And of course, monitoring and reporting are very important, as well as setting business objectives for the business to focus on the short, medium, and heading towards the long-term aspects of the business. I wrote an article in the CEO Today magazine, and if you wanted to take a read of that, if you just follow the URL in the actual presentation, I did a couple of different quotes there, but from my point of view, corporate governance is something that's vital to the success of an organization. Many people see corporate governance as a blocker rather than an enabler, and organizations that are agile have hands-on governance. They are people that are empowered, given responsibility, but also accountability, and they're able to make decisions. In agile businesses, most of the time, instead of being 100% sure, they're giving some leeway, whether it's 70 or 80%. They don't get penalized if they move forward, where the probability is around 80% sure. And agile businesses are more about movement and continuing to adapt and change, but driving forward. And so we touched again over the first session, second session, third session, and now this session, touching on corporate governance and the whole relationship between the shareholders, the board, the CEO and the company secretary, but also the management team that sit underneath. Businesses have to have a purpose, and there needs to be accountability. Decisions need to be made, whether it's at the board level, whether it's at the senior management level, or whether it's further down within junior management and within teams, employee teams. People need to be able to make decisions, and these should be made quickly. We shouldn't have to wait for the next quarter to get an approval from the powers that be. And so we have to focus, and it's all focused on the corporate objectives, heading towards the vision and the real purpose that the organization has been put in place for. And we look at the practices and procedures in this new way of doing things in the fourth industrial revolution. We are seeing digitalization, automation, and so practices and procedures are very, very important in regards to making sure that we have the right controls in place, that they can't be manipulated, and we have to provide at the end of the day both shareholders and stakeholders with a level of confidence. People don't invest in organizations, people don't join organizations as employees unless they feel that they're aligned with the culture, that they're aligned, and that they feel that they're joining an organization that cares about people, and also that they're aligned with the purpose and the culture of that organization. We think about risk management and the whole aspect in the life cycle. These we've touched on a little earlier on, but the whole aspect of where we need to be, what we're actually doing, implementing, but also monitoring and changing. It's about developing, and risk management is part of strategy. You have the strategy, the objectives, and then the risk element should be there to identify what are the key factors that may impact the achievement of those business objectives and the overall strategy. Old ways will not open new doors, especially as we move forward. The way businesses operate has changed. Even in the last 4 or 5 months, businesses have changed. People have moved to a hybrid model. Some organizations have moved fully to a remote operation, and that requires a lot of change within the organization strategically, and also from an investment point of view, making sure people have the right hardware, software, and technology. Do they have the right working environment? Are they able to collaborate? And how are they managing the aspects of mental health and keeping people engaged? During these times, we have to really be focused on our employees and also our customers. There's a lot of fear out there. And so from that respect, we should be close. And when we think about agile businesses, agile companies are focused on serving and being the servant. They're guiding employees, they're motivating, they're being the architect of change. They're inspiring and driving employees to be empowered and allowing them to drive forward with ideas and make decisions. And so even the way leadership has developed over the last number of months, but also number of years, as businesses have become partly agile or fully agile, then the whole leadership style has changed significantly. We have another 2 sessions. Next session will be the enhanced emotional intelligence for more influence, and the last session we'll be talking about building the optimal enterprise risk management culture within an organization and why that's important. And so it comes to question time. Let's see if there are any questions. We've had a mention here about Wells Fargo fraud example. Yes, Wells Fargo is one of those organizations, and we did a run through at the last session looking at the elements of fraud, but also setting unrealistic targets and whether or not it was spoken and directed. Also an element that allows people to achieve attainable goals. In the situation of Wells Fargo, there were mis-selling, there was coercion, there was also the focus on providing people with targets that were unrealistic and unachievable, and it was quoted that 8 is great, that 8 bank account for a customer was the optimal position. Who needs 8 bank accounts? Who needs 8 products from a bank? You might have a mortgage, you might have a credit card, you may have a salary account. What more do you want? That's 3. You may have a business account, that could be 4. You might have dollar and another currency account, but again, who needs 8 accounts? And so those areas are a big element. Were there any other particular pressing questions when it comes to agility? When we think about agility, it's about being able to adapt and change and be able to drive forward and move forward without delay. Being agile allows us to be on the front foot and to always be moving forward. Please feel free to jump in. You can use the mic if you like, or you can use the private chat if you feel it's more relevant. But from my side, I would thank you all for attending. I hope you found the mini masterclass of some help. And from my side, these areas, when we talk about strategy, customer experience, and the customer journey map, whole aspects of culture and employee engagement, they're very important when we think about strategy. And quite often, businesses are mainly focused on the financial aspects rather than the non-financial aspects when it comes to performance and strategy.